Hey y'all, you are now tuning in to the Praying Single Mom podcast where we love the Lord, we love to pray, and we even love a good slay child, okay? But we also love to get real, raw, uncut, and candid. No topic is off limits here as we are not after religion, but we're after relationship with Christ. We are not after perfection, but we're after connection. So we'll touch on all topics from why you need to get out of that relationship that is no longer serving you to rejection, abandonment, grief, neglect, you name it. From how to be a better parent to how to better that spending habit, honey, because we know how we can get, okay? We let God use us like never before. I hope you know that you're safe here. You can cry here. You can laugh here. Whatever floats your boat and keeps you afloat, okay? I'm your host, Lakeisha Cody. Let's get into it. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Praying Single Mom podcast. I am so excited to be on with you guys. Always excited to be before you guys. Tonight we have a special guest, and I am so excited to have her on. We have Miss Kaitlin Krueger tonight, and she's going to be letting us in on how she kept going after abuse and trauma. And I know that so many of us can relate to this topic. So I'm excited to hear what she has to say on tonight and what she's going to be pouring into us. Just a little bit about who Kaitlin is. Kaitlin Krueger is a small town single mom of 3 children. Nicolas, Nolan, and Nora. She is an accomplished female leader in the mental health industry across the tri-state area of Illinois, Iowa, as well as Missouri. She is a very proud of the community in which she lives and serves as mental health program director. Kaitlin achieved a Bachelor of Science in Psychology degree in 2009. In 2021, she went on to the challenge of continuing her education by beginning the dual master's degrees while raising her 3 children. That is amazing. She achieved a master's in business administration in early 2024 and is currently completing a second master's degree in management as well as leadership. With an extensive background in mental health care, she has served in various leadership positions over the past 10 years. She was recognized as best in region for superior planning and initiating new programs and innovative ideas in 2019. She is most passionate about women in leadership, supporting other women to reach their goals. Kaitlin is a driven individual who is continually on a quest for personal, professional, and spiritual growth. She strives to help others reach their true potential and attributes her personal successes to the Lord and Savior, Christ Jesus. So welcome on, Kaitlin. We are so happy to have you on tonight.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, yes, yes. And so before we get started, I ask every guest that I bring on this podcast episode, if you were in the elevator with someone and they were just to ask, who are you? What would you say?
Oh, I would say, I'm just me. I'm small town girl, born and raised in this little bitty town. Single mom, and I would say right now I'm just trying to balance work and life, and just raise my kids and take one day at a time.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. I love that. And I will say you are accomplishing and you have accomplished so many things.
Thank you.
What year did you become a single mom, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah. So let's see, my oldest son is 14, my youngest is 9, so about 9 years ago. She was 2 months old when I split from their father.
Oh, wow. And so you were able to go to school, you were able to obtain multiple degrees during this time on your single motherhood journey.
Yes. So my story, comes from a place of a lot of domestic abuse, which ended the relationship with their father. And I will say, I was very blessed to have a family that supported me through that. And when it came to making the final decision that, that we had to leave for our own safety, one of my core memories in that is truly my uncle praying with me in the car My aunt and uncle drove us home. We lived about 3 hours from where we live now. Um, and just praying with me and just, saying it's time, you got to go home, home to where my parents are, and just giving me that encouragement, that God was going to be with the kids and I no matter what route we chose. And so we ended up actually moving back here to my hometown where, like I said, my parents live, and we moved in with my parents for about 6 years
Yeah.
before I could get back on my own feet. And so, yeah, so I've been back in school now for the last 2.5 years. It'll be about 3 years by the time I'm done. So it's been
Wow.
been kind of a wild ride. But
Wow.
we're doing
I
it.
just
So,
I just want to stop you there. And first of all, I just want to commend you. You haven't even got into like the most of your story, but it's so amazing what you are doing. Your perseverance and your persistence is amazing. From what I'm hearing, your uncle prayed with you. In that moment, you felt like you could move forward even though you were not clear or sure what that would look like, you felt like you could move forward in that moment, or was it after after he prayed?
yeah, I think, in all honesty, I think when the day came when we had to split, and when I say we had to split, it was literally what I fully believe to be a life or death situation. We had to go. There wasn't a whole lot of really thinking that through. Um, Although I will say, I was given the option to stay, but it just wasn't something that I knew was best for my own safety or for the safety of my children. And so, I just the encouragement that he provided me, and my aunt actually drove us in her car, and my uncle drove my car, and we kind of got a little more than halfway back to where we live now, and just pausing in the car in that moment before we went our separate ways. And just I don't know that I really knew in the moment that everything was going to be okay. I was still in a lot of shock. My kids were very little. My oldest was 5 at that time,
Yeah.
and I just had a newborn baby, and my middle son would have been 3. So there's a lot happening in my head, and emotionally, I don't think I really knew what was even taking
What was
place. I
it?
just yeah, I just knew now was time to pray, and it was time to move forward.
Yeah.
And so, a lot progressed from there. But that was certainly one of my most pivotal moments. Anytime somebody asks me about my story, I always have to say that part, because it really set the course for us, I think, for the next several years.
That's amazing. Another thing that stood out to me is that you moved back in with your parents for about 6 years, right?
Yeah.
Um, And during that time, it sounds like it was a blessing for you and your children. Hearing where you are now on your journey, can you tell us a little bit about, as a mom, having to move back in with your parents? How did you overcome, first of all? I'm pretty sure there was some shame, potentially disappointment, regret. How were you able to overcome all of those different type of emotions and just sit with that in 6 years? I mean, it sounds short, but when you're in it, that can seem like forever. So can you take us a little bit inside that moment?
Yeah. So you hit the nail on the head. It felt like forever. It absolutely did. 6 years was about 4 years ago now, and it still feels like yesterday. It was really hard. I would say one thing that really sticks out in my mind, when you're asking about sitting in that emotion, I don't think at the time I even had the ability to sit in the emotion. I had not processed what had happened to me, the day that we left, and this was something that had, the abuse had been going on for years in many different ways. But when you finally get the strength to leave, in some aspect, it is like a weight off of your shoulders, and then the world turns, and now you have to face reality,
Yeah,
which is not only dealing with my own emotions, but the emotions of my 3 children.
yeah,
And also, the emotions of my parents, because, they're used to being empty nesters. And, My brother and I have both had been out of the house for several years by then. In here, our lives kind of collided back together. So it was really difficult, but definitely a blessing. Absolutely a blessing because, I didn't make enough money to be able to support the kids and I on my own. I was actually working two separate jobs at the time. I had a day shift or like a part-time job on a psychiatric unit at a hospital in the afternoon or the morning, excuse me. And then I went from like 2 to 10 to an ER shift at a completely different hospital. Before I came back here, I drove a car that I don't know, by the grace of God, it made it 3.5 hours back home. And that's why actually my uncle drove it for the majority of the drive because I don't think it would even go over like 50 miles an hour or something. And the brakes were shot. I mean, it was truly one of those things where had it not been for the support of my parents and my family, I do not know to this day what we would have done. I certainly could not have done that on my own. And so, yeah, just um, coming back home was a big deal for me personally. It was something that, I didn't plan on doing. I didn't want to do. I lived around the St. Louis area and I loved it down there and I never planned on coming back.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that was hard. And also, I think you run into a lot of different worldly views, right? When when these things happen. So not really fully being able to process and understand how the trauma and abuse had really affected me was a huge deal. Looking back at that, I made a lot of really bad decisions, I think, with whether it was people that I hung out with or, people that I called friends at the time, would like, you just need a drink or you just need to do this, you just need to do that. And when my ex would have my kids, he no longer sees them, unfortunately, but it was kind of like I couldn't be alone. So when I couldn't be with my children, I just fell to pieces.
Wow.
I mean, there was, I would hang out with people, we would, go to the bars or whatever, but it definitely was not a healthy lifestyle for me
Yeah.
whatsoever.
Yeah. Now that you're speaking about that, I was going to get right into like you talking about some of the challenges that you faced with abuse and trauma. And it sounds like you were not even you knew that you had went through this hard ordeal, but when did it hit you that this was some trauma that you had to deal with?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Um, I think it didn't really hit me probably until several years after the fact when I just found myself not happy or satisfied with life. I had a job that, was okay. Um, but I knew it wasn't where I was supposed to be at the time.
Mm.
And I made great friends and I felt like I had a good support group and my children were making friends and um, it kind of felt like everything around me was just okay. And then again, when my kids would, have to go away for the weekend, I just, I couldn't manage my own emotions, especially not if I was alone. I mean, all I wanted to do was cry, was very depressed. Um, for me, stress and depression just like physically eats my body. I mean, I'm 5'9". I'm pretty thin anyway. And so I had lost a ton of weight. And to be honest, I hate looking back at pictures of myself from back then because it was not healthy at all. Um, and so I don't know that there was like one pivotal moment where I was like, I have to buck up and deal with this versus I think I just sort of looked around me and realized like life was not where I wanted it to be. And not just where I wanted it to be, but it wasn't, I don't think where anyone in my support system really wanted me to be either.
Yeah, for sure. And you spoke a lot about not being able to be alone. Um, I'm pretty sure that has changed now. Has that changed? Are you able to kind of be alone now and be okay with it?
Oh yeah. Yeah. That is one thing I will say that I truly feel that God has changed my heart in that way. Um, when I am by myself now, which is kind of rare because, like I said, my kids, I don't share custody with them anymore. Or custody of them anymore. So we spend a lot of time together. But, when I do have that time to myself, or, in thinking about just being a single mom and not, being married and my plans not working out the way I had wanted them to, I have really learned to lean into that
Yeah.
and just accept what I feel like God is calling me to do now in life, and really learn and grow through the season of singleness, and of being a single mom, not just being single. But I will say the one of the best parts of it is we are now at a place where we can manage those emotions and we can process all of the stuff that we've been through, and talk about that between my kids and I. And I feel together as a family, we have grown immensely just in the last 5 years. Um, and so, yeah, being alone, I don't look at it as a bad thing anymore. I really
Yeah.
don't.
Awesome. And with you being a leader, in the mental health industry, I'm pretty sure you went to therapy. How long did it take you to make the decision to go to therapy?
I actually, when the kids and I first moved back home, I went and sought out a counselor immediately at a women's shelter. However, that did not go well because I also took my oldest son because he was witness to a lot of the abuse that had happened, whereas my other two really don't remember because they were just too little. Um, and it didn't go well because I would be in one room and he would go with another counselor, and we were not able to get him comfortable being there without me. And it was just like far enough away that I couldn't justify going there 2 times. Um, and so that kind of gave up on that early on. But several years later, I did try again. I found a therapist that I liked, but we didn't really connect very well. I felt very much like, oh, I don't know, kind of just that she didn't quite get where I was coming from. And to be honest, I don't blame her. I really think it was a matter of me still not being able to explain in words that probably really made a lot of sense. I would just say things like, I'm so angry, or I'm just so exhausted. And, I wasn't interested in taking medications because I knew that this was my circumstance that I wanted to change.
Yeah.
Um, so again, the second time I gave up, and I started feeling really called back to, finding someone. And this time around, I actually found a Christian therapist. And that woman changed my perspective a lot. I can't even describe to you. I I no longer see her because she had to step out of the business due to health reasons. But I wish that I had her personal phone number because I think I would send her thank you cards every day of the week because she changed my life. I mean, just opened my heart and my eyes to um, not just therapy in general and healing, but healing with God. And that was a whole other experience that I was never maybe made aware of or never really open to before.
I love that. I love that. And so, do you believe as Christians or believers that it's important to kind of seek out a counselor or a therapist who have the same beliefs? Do you think that makes a difference?
I think it definitely helps. Um, I the lady that I connected with so strongly was very strong in her faith. I think the other counselors that I had seen in the past, I also sort of like checked the box that I wanted a Christian therapist, but it never really came up necessarily. I think unless maybe I prompted that, which is normal, and I think okay. Um, I would say, if you're somebody of a strong faith and that is what is calling you and pulling you, and that is the light that's guiding you, it absolutely makes a difference. It made a huge difference for me in my healing process.
For sure. And do you have your children in therapy as well? I know you said the younger two, they don't remember much, but your son, did he ever continue on with the therapy?
We did a couple of times. It never went too far. And I think a lot of that just, it's hard when they're young to get them so involved in that. And he is somebody who a lot of times I think would rather open up to me than a stranger. So I will say we do have a really great connection, he and I, and actually with all three of my kids, which is a huge blessing. So we have that open conversation, and it helps that I've kind of been through that side of the therapy myself. So we can have those talks, and working in mental health for so long. Um, I think it makes it a little bit easier for us to sort of work through some of that together.
Yeah, yeah. I'm gonna go back just a little bit, because I'm always thinking about the moms who are listening in.
Mhm.
And I know a few moms who are dealing with their similar situations. Um, they also have children and they may be afraid to leave. And it could also be a life or death situation. How do you move past that fear of what if he kills me? Or, what if I don't make it out? What if I leave and he stalks me or he finds me and hurt me? Like, what advice would you give the mom who is so afraid to make that next step and she feels like where she is now is the best that it may get for her?
That's a great question. So I will say that in my personal experience, we were there. I was being stalked, I was being threatened. Um, he was showing up unannounced, just awful things. And I lived a life for many years of reoccurring nightmares. um, all of sort of your typical PTSD symptoms, right? I would become very paranoid. Actually, when the kids and I first moved into our own home of just a few years ago, I was terrified to be here by myself. Like any noise outside, I thought, this is it, and that was by that point, let's see, 6 or 7 years, had gone by, and it still was coming up. Um, and a lot of times I would still have flashbacks of the day, when I left, and just when things got as bad as they did. And so I I guess my what I would say to another mom in situations like that is utilize any resources that you may have. And if you don't have any, whether that's a women's safety shelter or calling, a domestic violence hotline or something like that, if you don't feel like you have a personal connection with someone that you can go to and get safe, utilize the resources in your communities because they are set up to help women like you and women with children. Um, in I know the ones around where I live do a very good job of, keeping women safe. They actually have a home that's like the address isn't made public,
Yeah.
for that reason to keep you safe, and they will help you with resources. I was lucky enough to have, like I said, family to step in. But even then, when I did, I lived with this sort of dark cloud hanging over me all the time. Um, I have, a close friend of mine who would tell you that anytime we would go out, whether it was, to dinner or a company Christmas party. I think one year it happened at an old job of mine. I was very much triggered by other people getting loud with each other, or seeing another couple, bickering even. I mean, I was on high alert immediately, and it would just upset me. And I wanted to, part of me jump in and, save the situation. And my friend would always be like, we have to leave, and of course I would leave, but I lived with that for a very long time. And so it's hard to deal with, but like we were saying earlier, it feels like forever, but I promise you it will not be forever. You
Yeah.
just have to be brave enough to take that step.
I love that advice. And as Christian women, I'm just thinking about some of the things that I hear moms say. What would you say to the mom who's praying that he changes? And, I don't know if you dealt with, oh, I'm praying and asking God to change him, to fix him. What would you say to that mom who's praying that, God will change him and that he'll stop the abuse, he'll stop the jealousy, he'll stop the verbal abuse, he'll stop the physical abuse, he'll stop the stalking? What would you say to that mom?
Here's what I would say. I would say if you are a praying mom, which I hope you are because you're listening to the podcast, I would say you really have to, and this, I say this, you meaning I did the same thing, check yourself when it comes to understanding God's truths. And so, God would not send you someone who does these things. And I certainly understand the want to wait it out. Maybe he will change, God will work this miracle and maybe he will. But I think it all comes down to not ignoring the red flags, understanding what God's truths are and what a godly man is and how he should treat you and should treat your children, whether he is the father of your children or not. Um, that for me was a very big eye opener, to sort of sit back and kind of in a way do like a pros and cons. What is God saying that this person should be doing? Should be, how should he be treating me? What are these feelings that I'm having now? And almost like making that comparison, and are you seeing the change?
Yeah,
If the changes aren't coming, this may be God's way of showing you exactly what you're asking for. It's just not what you're looking for,
that's
right?
so that's really good, honestly. I've been there to where I've prayed for change and it seemed like the situation got worse. And I'm like, okay, God, maybe this is your way of telling me, like, you have to go. A lot of times we do ignore the red flags that were there to begin with, but what about the signs that God is showing you in that moment? Maybe He's just not answering in the way that you want Him to, but He is, in fact, answering by showing you that if you stay in the situation, there will be no peace. And I always tell, people, one of the biggest red flags that God gives is an absence of his peace. I truly, truly, truly believe.
Yes.
I truly believe that. And so, do you have anything else that you would like to share to the moms that are listening in? What advice would you give a mom who has lost hope? She may be in this situation, she's probably left the situation, but what advice would you give her?
I think I would say, you know, just keep going forward. That is such a pivotal group of words that continually shows up in my life as I've dealt with these things, whether that be, praying and hearing, the Holy Spirit just give me that sense of, write this down, keep going forward. Um, that looks different every day, and moving forward looks different every second of every day. There are days when I have had no motivation. I can barely get out of bed, but I do. And so that to me is a win, right? That's moving forward that day. And maybe tomorrow is a totally different picture. Maybe tomorrow, you get your coffee and you go to work and you rock it. And, it's just a totally um, different circumstance. But yeah, I mean, the thought of not living in the past, so not hanging on to the abuse or the trauma or the, the pain that we all have lived through. And everybody has a very different story. But I think that is one commonality that you can't live there.
Mhm.
You have to make that choice to leave that behind and keep going forward in another direction, because the world is going to move forward whether you do or not.
Yeah.
And living, and you do have to sit in that emotion, and you have to grieve the loss of what you thought your life was going to be. That for me was very hard. um but you can't stay there, you can't live there. You just, I keep saying it, but I keep saying it because it is so huge for me. Just keep on moving. And it sounds silly, but even when, if I'm having a rough day and I get up in the morning, I will, just tell myself, let's go, just keep on going, just keep
Yeah.
on going, do
Yeah.
what you got to do today. Tomorrow's a new day. Um,
No, that's
so
really good. That's really good advice. That's something that I remind myself every single day, even when I don't feel like, I have to keep going. I
yeah.
have to keep going. I think that's such great advice. One last thing that I will ask you, and I know this is some of the moms' fear, is that they may never find love again, or they may never be hopeful for love again. Are you still open to finding the love that God has for you?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I that's it's such a fine line to walk, because I think as women, especially as moms, it's sort of this stigma of, I don't even know if you call it a stigma, but it's like this worry, right? That you have, that you want to find the right man, but is he going to be the right man for your kids?
Yeah.
And balancing that again it's it's just so difficult. I don't think there's any like perfect answer, but I do believe that what makes the difference is this: you can't live a life wanting the godly man that God has for you and expecting that man to show up and fix your problems and
That's
take that pain away from you. Um, do I believe that, the man that God may have for me, might come along and provide me a lot of comfort and support in that? Absolutely. That's something that I would want in a partner. But I don't believe that you can take all of this and dump it on another person, because what you're doing is sitting and waiting for someone to just take it from you instead of taking those steps forward. Um, and again, like kind of what I was saying a minute ago about looking back at the past, it's like the story in the Bible of like Lot's wife, right?
yeah.
Like we don't even know her name. She wasn't important enough for us to know her name in the Bible. But the one thing God told us about her was, or the Bible tells us about her, is that she looked back and turned into a pillar of salt,
Yeah.
because she didn't follow, what God was asking of her. And so I think it's important um, not to stay there long, like I said, but you also can't stay there and wait for somebody else to take it from you. You got to dig deep and find that motivation. Help yourself. And then, I also believe that once you start falling in line with God's will for your life, I believe things like that will happen. And in this, sorry to say in this field, not in this field, that's the work of me coming out. But in Christianity, I mean, I feel like we hear that a lot, right? Of, listening and following God's word and letting all of these parts align into your life, and he will come through. And I absolutely believe that. I really, really do. So
If you ladies are listening in, make sure you take that advice. That's some excellent advice. The man that God has for you, he's not coming to fix you, but he's coming to evolve with you. He's coming to evolve because it'll be a journey, but you have to start first. You have to do the work first. You have to begin to put in the work first. And I do believe that that's even stepping out on faith. You know, you have to do the work, be willing to do the work first. And so I super enjoyed this. Could you let the ladies know who are listening in, how can they find you if you want to give that out? I don't know if you
sure.
offer coaching services. I know you're in the mental health field, but um, what do you offer for women who may be dealing with this? Do you offer anything for that?
So I would say I don't offer anything professionally, but I do have a Facebook and a LinkedIn and an Instagram. And I'm more than happy to connect with, other women who are going through this, especially, um, being someone who's lived it. And I say that lightly because again, being in mental health, I'm not a counselor, but I do live in the mental health world. But I am more than happy to, share more of my story and just be that friendly support for any female who might be needing it. So yeah, I would feel free to reach out.
Yeah, I love that. And if you guys are in the Praying Single Mom group or the Praying Single Mom community, you can definitely reach out to her on there as well. But again, Kaitlin, we thank you so much for joining us on the Praying Single Mom podcast. And I truly, truly, truly enjoyed this episode. I'm pretty sure it's going to bless so many ladies that are listening in.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you're very welcome.